For the first time in modern history, a video has surfaced that shows something the world has long suspected but never conclusively proven. United States military forces intercept a cargo ship near the Venezuelan coast, armed personnel board the vessel, and the cargo, crude oil, is seized. This is not an allegation. This is not a leaked report. This is not speculation. This is visible, documented action. For decades, the United States has been accused of quietly extracting or redirecting oil from conflict zones, Syria being the most frequently cited example. Yet until now, critics lacked undeniable visual proof. This incident changes that. And what makes it even more significant is not just what happened, but the legal logic used to justify it, because that logic has implications far beyond Venezuela. It affects Russia, it affects China, and potentially it affects India, and every country dependent on maritime energy trade. What we are witnessing is not a random enforcement action. It is the early phase of something much larger, an oil blockade, a pressure campaign, and possibly the opening move toward a major regional war. What exactly happened? According to U.S. authorities, the intercepted vessel was carrying Venezuelan crude oil and operating as part of what Washington describes as a shadow fleet. A shadow fleet refers to tankers that are not properly registered with international maritime organizations, lack valid insurance, use opaque ownership structures, often switch flags or identification systems mid-journey. The U.S. claim is simple. Because this ship was not legally registered under international maritime law, it does not enjoy legal protections. Therefore, U.S. forces argue they were within their rights to board the vessel and seize its cargo. On paper, this sounds like technical enforcement. In reality, it represents something far more dangerous. Why drug trafficking does not explain this action. The Trump administration has repeatedly stated that Venezuela is a major source of narcotics entering the United States. If that is the central concern, one question immediately arises: why seize oil? This ship was not carrying drugs, it was carrying crude oil, Venezuela's primary economic lifeline. That contradiction reveals the true objective. This is not a counter-narcotics operation. This is economic warfare. The strategy: economic strangulation before military action. Historically, major military interventions rarely begin with bombs. They begin with isolation. The United States has used this strategy repeatedly. Iraq in the 1990s, Iran through sanctions, Syria via economic denial, Russia through energy restrictions. The goal is always the same: reduce state revenue, weaken institutions, create internal pressure, then strike or force regime change without firing a shot. What we are seeing near Venezuela is the maritime version of that strategy. An oil blockade in slow motion. Why this is called an oil blockade? A traditional naval blockade requires a formal declaration of war. This does not. Instead, selective seizures, legal ambiguity enforcement under international law compliance. This keeps the action deniable while achieving the same result. Oil exports are disrupted, insurance costs skyrocket, shipping companies withdraw, buyers hesitate. The country is effectively strangled without a single missile launched. The Russian warning, not just rhetoric. Following this incident, Russia issued a direct warning to Washington. The message was blunt: if these actions continue, South America could become the site of another major war. This warning should not be dismissed. Russia has deep strategic interests in Venezuela. Energy investments, military cooperation, geopolitical positioning in the Western Hemisphere for Moscow. This is not just about Venezuela. It is about precedent. If the United States can seize oil shipments under the justification of shadow fleet violations, then Russian oil shipments are next. The F-35 signal satellite tracking and defense analysts have noted increased U.S. military activity around Venezuela, including advanced aircraft deployments, surveillance missions, naval positioning. These are not defensive moves. These are preparatory moves. History shows that when advanced assets like the F-35 are deployed near a country, escalation is already on the table. The shadow fleet argument: why it matters globally. This is where the issue becomes extremely relevant to countries like India. The United States has repeatedly claimed that much of Russia's oil exports, especially those heading toward Asia, are transported using similar shadow fleet mechanisms. Now imagine this scenario. An oil tanker carrying Russian crude toward India is intercepted at sea. The U.S. claims it is unregistered. The cargo is seized. What legal recourse exists? None. That is why this incident is not just about Venezuela, it is about redefining maritime enforcement power. The Indian perspective: India imports the majority of its energy. In recent years, Russian oil has become a key stabilizing factor for Indian energy security. If the shadow fleet doctrine is expanded, Indian energy routes become vulnerable, insurance premiums surge, strategic autonomy is compromised. This is why New Delhi is watching this development very closely. The historical parallel: naval blockades as war tools. Naval blockades are among the oldest instruments of war. From ancient sieges to modern geopolitics, the logic remains unchanged. Starve the enemy of resources, wait for collapse, strike when resistance is weakest. The United States is not blockading all Venezuelan ports yet, but it is tightening the noose. Maduro's exit option. The negotiated escape report suggests Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has explored a deal with Washington. The rumored terms: resignation from power, safe passage to another country, legal immunity, financial guarantees reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars, protection for close allies and officials. This would allow the U.S. to achieve regime change without war. From Washington's perspective, this is the cleanest outcome. From Maduro's perspective, it may be survival. Why this deal makes strategic sense. History offers precedents. Saddam Hussein refused and was removed violently. Gaddafi negotiated too late and paid with his life. Maduro understands the pattern. If bombs fall, Venezuela cannot defend itself against U.S. military power. Negotiation may be the only rational option. Trump's calculus: Donald Trump's political identity is built on a single narrative. I ended wars. I did not start them. Accepting a deal that removes Maduro without bloodshed fits perfectly into that narrative. He could present it as a victory for peace, a win for American security, a demonstration of strength without war. Whether this deal happens remains uncertain. But the fact that it is being discussed publicly means the pressure campaign is working. What if war happens? If airstrikes begin, Venezuela's military infrastructure would collapse rapidly, civilian casualties would be inevitable, refugee flows would destabilize neighboring countries, South America would face its greatest security crisis in decades, and history suggests it would not stop with one country. The South American domino effect. South America has largely avoided large-scale interstate wars in recent decades. That stability is fragile. Once military intervention becomes normalized, regional trust collapses. Alliances shift, external powers increase involvement. This is how continents destabilize. Why the world should pay attention. This incident represents a transformation in how power is exercised. Not through declarations of war, not through occupation, but through control of logistics, legality, and finance. Oil is the lever. Maritime law is the justification. Military force is the backstop. What happened off the Venezuelan coast is not an isolated enforcement action. It is a message to Venezuela, a message to Russia, a message to China, and a message to every country that relies on energy shipped across open seas. The rules are changing, and when rules change without consensus, instability follows. The world is not watching the beginning of a war yet, but it is watching the architecture of one being assembled. What happens next will define not just Venezuela's future, but the future of global energy security itself.